midseason grades for St. Louis Cardinals players. And no, not everybody gets an F.
Not everybody gets an F, but before we do this, do you want to officially grade the team? It seems like an exercise in futility at this point, but I would say F. I mean,
I would too.
Where they are.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that F is the proper grade for the team that had all kinds of expectations going into 2023 and didn't.
Yeah, like it kind of matches the different words Cardinals fans use about the team while watching them this season. So they get an F as a result of that, if you catch my drift. So
yeah.
I think that's totally fair. We both would be on board with that.
Right.
But as you said, individually, there may be some room for some other letter grades to pop out for different guys.
So I'm going to throw out names. You give me your letter grade. I'll give mine too. But let's do letter grades for individual players here. All right. I will start with Paul Goldschmidt.
Okay.
Letter grade.
Like, here's the thing. Paul Goldschmidt's numbers have come down from the MVP season last year, but he's still basically been Paul Goldschmidt, right? Like, he's been pretty much what you expect. Maybe a couple more lapses defensively than we normally would anticipate, but he's certainly not been the problem with the Cardinals. 844 OPS. He's got a nice batting average. The numbers across the board are solid. 15 home runs. It's maybe a little bit below expectation, but I don't think it's jarring. The 85 strikeouts maybe strike me, Andy, as a little more than you would expect for Goldschmidt at this point in time, but everybody strikes out in modern baseball. I'm going to give Goldschmidt just like a solid B. I don't think there's anything alarming in either direction about him. I don't worry that he's suddenly falling off a cliff. Like, that's a conversation for Cardinals fans where they say, look, this guy's getting into age 36, going to be age 37 season next year. Do they really want to extend him, or do you trade him now to try and capitalize on the value that he has? I still think Paul Goldschmidt's actually got good years ahead of him. And he's a B only because of the massive expectations he's set. It's probably not fair to him. How good he played last year makes us think, oh, could he do that again? But I don't have any problem with giving Paul Goldschmidt a B. Do you see it differently?
I would say B+. I would even go a little bit higher than you did. I'm fine with that. Again, you're talking about a guy that has had to buoy the offense most of the year. He has had the most consistent year, you would think, offensively, even though he's even had some ups and downs here and there. But I would say he's been the most consistent hitter that the Cardinals have had. Nolan Arenado had a real slump during the early part of the year. He turned that around and has overall put together a pretty good season himself. But I think it's been a much straighter line for Paul Goldschmidt this year.
So what do you value then? Like, how would you grade then? Let's go into Arenado. How would you grade him differently? Because the numbers cumulatively are actually better offensively than Paul Goldschmidt. 19 home runs to 15. The OPS is a little bit higher. He's now north of 850. Or he's right at 850, I should say. What do you look at when it comes to handing out a grade based on knowing the Arenado numbers are there, as we always said they would be? Like, the numbers at the end of the year will be there for Arenado. But because it's come with a lot of hot and cold, maybe not as much steadiness, consistency, how do you grade Arenado relative to where you were with Goldschmidt at a B+?
So I am around the same with Arenado. I would say he's about a B+, but I ding Arenado a little bit more because his defense has dropped off a little bit.
That's been weird.
Has not been the same player at third that we are used to seeing Nolan Arenado beating. And again, that's unfair because he has won something like 9 straight Gold Gloves.
Andy, every year he's been a pro. Every year in the big leagues, he's won the Gold Glove, and he's got several platinums to his name.
It's not fair to put him all the way up there, and when he drops down to a little bit above average, then all of a sudden we throw our arms in the air and say, where's Nolan Arenado? So that's unfair. But I think it's B+ because, yes, he's been a slightly better hitter, but a worse defender than I expected.
I'm going to go this exact same grade as Goldschmidt and give him a B, maybe a little bit because of the defense, but more because of the periods of time where the Cardinals really could have used a lift. He did go through more prolonged stretches where he slumped. But it's a B. It's a favorable grade. I would actually be more inclined to go B+. Maybe that seems silly, but I just want to not minimize how good Arenado's really been playing, because like his numbers were really down there, and he's brought them all the way up to a point where they're better than Goldschmidt's now. So to make sure we're giving appropriate due to that. I'm right between that BB plus line. But you mentioned the defense, and I think it's interesting. This new article from Derek Gould of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, he tweeted it out today, and he tweeted out this quote from Arenado. Just to be honest, I think I made a mistake. I'm trying to conserve my body, so I've taken less ground balls. I think that's helped me because I turned it on to finish the first half. And then goes on and read the article to hear the rest of the quote. But I think that's interesting that he kind of opens up and says, I have had this regimented defensive way about going about things, I should say, historically, that maybe he's kind of tried to conserve himself a little bit more and is getting bitten by that on the defensive end, which I think is interesting because you want the guy to be in his best form offensively. That's kind of the primary thing that matters, but so much of the value of Arenado is also his defense. So I wonder if he's going to go about that any differently, maybe moving forward to get back to what he's used to doing his whole career. He's been insane. He's been a fiend about the work he puts in, not during the games, right? To practice and to be diligent in those things. I wonder kind of how he plans to balance that moving forward. It's got to be tough because for a while there he wasn't hitting well, and he wore that, right? Like that was something that got to him personally. And so now the hitting is there, but he wants to be that same crisp defender. He takes a lot of pride in that. So I think a very solid year by Arenado. BB, I'm actually talking myself into B plus too, because I don't think it's right to be so hard on him because the guy is as hard on himself as anybody would be. And he's got the best numbers offensively on the team. And from where he was, I think that should stand for something. So I'm a pretty favorable view for me of both Arenado and Goldie.
All right, 875-KTGR. Give us your midseason player grades for the Cardinals. You can text in a player for us to weigh in on here. 875-KTGR. All right. Wilson Contreras.
Oh, we're getting right into it, are we?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Now let's see what our answers are here. Wilson Contreras.
Well, you go first.
Oh, okay, fine.
D.
Really?
Okay, Chris.
Oh, great. Okay, Chris, go ahead. Tell us why D.
Yeah, I mean, the pitching's been bad. The catching's been subpar. I mean, there was that whole fiasco earlier on in the season. Whether or not that was totally his fault is still kind of up in the air. The offense hasn't been great, which is kind of what you paid all that money for in the first place. Yeah, man, it's just kind of feeling like kind of a dud to start out the season. And it's just, yeah, I'm just feeling D right now.
So here's the thing. I don't put the whole early season, can't catch these guys. I don't know if I put that all on Wilson Contreras.
Sure. And we talked about that being a fiasco on the Cardinals and the way they handled that. But Andy, I asked you this.
Yes.
You were gone during when this kind of all was coming to a head. Did you see the report from Michael Kay after the Cardinals-Yankees series where he had basically been told by somebody with the Cardinals that there was an issue with Wilson Contreras potentially calling pitches that the individual pitcher did not throw on the pitch com, like pressing a button for a cutter and the guy didn't have one, like that sort of thing. And so I'm just giving an example. I don't know necessarily which pitchers or how often this was happening. I think because of PitchCom, I would say that might be something plausible. But wouldn't that make sense that that is what it was, that they tried so hard to keep it quiet to where it doesn't get found out until somebody from the Yankees comes into town and says, yeah, I was told by somebody with the Cardinals that Contreras was calling for pitches that these guys didn't throw or very seldom threw. If that might change your viewpoint at all of maybe the Cardinals were onto something with the Contreras thing. I still don't think they handled it well, even if that's what it was. But you weren't here during that kind of all coming out, so I was curious if you had a take on that.
I still don't put much of that on Contreras, though.
Okay, I'm totally with that.
I'm more looking at the Cardinals organization saying, look, you realized that there was a stalwart in your organization of Yadier Molina that had to leave, and now you have to worry more about the catcher position, even with a savvy veteran in Wilson Contreras coming in. And he's going to be a really exciting player going forward, but you have to make sure that he is on the same page with everybody. I put that more on the organization still than I do Wilson Contreras. But that said, has the catching been great? I don't know. I wouldn't
pass balls.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a whole lot to be longing for when Cardinal fans remember what they got with Yadier Molina, and now they have to deal with Wilson Contreras, and then the bat hasn't really alleviated any of those fears either. I'm not going to go D, but I will go C-. It has not been what you would expect out of an average MLB catcher. And certainly one of Wilson Contreras' stature when he comes with the big bat and everything and defensively can hold his own. It just has not materialized this year.
I'm going to go right up the middle, standard C letter grade, because I think the defensive stuff is sort of what it is, and the Cardinals should have known better. Like the Cubs knew what he was defensively, and that you may not be able to get around it and improve it. You'd like to see him be as diligent as he can to clean up some of those things. But I think a lot of the fundamentals we talked about with this Cardinals team, Contreras is an example of a guy that's not been strong in the fundamentals areas. However, what he can bring when he's going right at the plate, he could do the exact same defense the second half of the season, minus like getting benched. That was weird. But he could do the same thing almost behind the plate. And if he just hits the way he's hit for the last month, the letter grade for me is going to be a B+ or higher by the end of the year. Do you realize that over the past 30 games, I should say past 30 days, Wilson Contreras leads the Cardinals in OPS, near 1,200 OPS for Wilson Contreras. Like he has been on an absolute tear at the plate, which to me, that's what the Cardinals signed. Like they did. They signed him to replace Yadier Molina, but they also got no production offensively from the catcher position last year. And he's got an 1195 OPS over the past 30 days. So I feel like you keep doing that, you keep hitting 400 and end up with your numbers offensively being right where they're supposed to be. I'm a lot better feeling about Wilson Contreras, but he's got to prove it for a little longer because he was really rough for a while there at the plate.
875 KTGR doing player grades for the Cardinals for the midseason. 875 KTGR. You can text in yours. All right, Jack Flaherty. Letter grade for Jack Flaherty midseason.
I mean, it's a C for me. It's a C because and maybe even C+ because we're seeing a little bit of a better version of him recently, and that could parlay into being a nice trade chip for the Cardinals. I'll go C+ because he's pitched better. But he wasn't pleasant when he wasn't pitching well. He's been healthy, which is nice, so I want to give him credit for that. But I think it was hard on him early in the season, and that was coinciding with a lot of the Wilson Contreras stuff, where I don't know if it was blame game stuff being passed around. It's all settled down, but man, you got to remember how tumultuous it kind of was early in the season. I think Flaherty was a part of that, but I'll go C+ because I actually do have a more favorable view of the way he's been able to kind of settle in and throw some really good baseball recently. Like he's been a lot better lately to where I think he's going to have value at the deadline, and that wouldn't have been the case if he would have just kind of stayed mired in the struggles of the early season. I'll go C+.
I'll say C. Last year, whatever you got out of Jack Flaherty was icing on the cake, pretty much. But this year, I think you needed to. The expectation was raised a little bit, so I'm basing it a little bit off of expectation. Like I expected Jack Flaherty, as long as he was healthy and he was able to consistently go out there every fifth day, I was expecting him to at least be the second best starter on the Cardinals, and I don't think he's been that this year.
That's fair.
I mean, like Michaelis has been better. Montgomery's been better. You can put him as maybe the third best, but with all the expectations you had, at least coming off your dream season a few years ago, and then everybody's waiting and waiting for you to consistently be out there. Can you find what you had just a few years ago? It's been okay, but it's been third or fourth starter worthy instead of what I think we had viewed Jack Flaherty of in the past. So I'm going to say C.
I think that's fair. You've talked me back down to a C. And when we think about this team, like we said, the team is an F. We haven't given away very many low grades at this point. So let's get into it. We're getting on the text line here, 875 KTGR. Joel texts in, says Arenado, Goldie, and Donovan are all A's, but not sure anyone on the pitching staff deserves more than a C. Lots of F's on the pitching staff. I would agree with Donovan being an A. I've been impressed by him. Yeah. I think he's done a nice job. But like outlook, where are we going to find some of the lower grades to bring the cumulative grade down? Okay. Because I look at guys that have underperformed. Tyler O'Neill, for me, it's either an F or an incomplete because of the opportunity that they gave him and the way he very much did not run with it and became sort of a distraction, whether through his fault or not. It's been a failure to this point. We'll see if he can bounce it back. Like Lars Nootbaar, to me, I'm going to go C-. Been a little bit disappointing. But it's on the pitching side, too, Andy, that like we got a text in as well about Wainwright. Vince says he's giving him a D. Doesn't deserve an F because he missed the first part of the year and didn't lose any games then. It's an F for Wainwright. It's been an unmitigated disaster.
Yeah, I would go F, yes.
I'd give a D to Steven Matz. He could turn it around.
I'd go F for him. Like, I would even go all the way there.
It's a failure. You're right. I'm being a little too generous, but I did see that last Sunday start where I thought, okay, maybe can he turn it around? But what he's been so far, it's a D- at best. And those two spots in the rotation are what's killing you. Matthew Liberatore, right? You thought, well, he's at least depth. No, he's been a D- at best. And the only reason I don't give him a failing grade is because they didn't once give him the rhythm of starting every fifth day. It's like, if you want to look at how this team gets tanked down to an F, I'll give Giovanni Gallegos like a D+, because he's had some really good moments, but he's had too many contributing to the blown save issue of this bullpen that it's killed this team to have the lack of reliability in that bullpen. So I wanted to make sure we talked about some of the negatives, because we started off talking about the team being an F. Where's it coming from? Pretty much universally the pitching staff.
Yeah, because nobody on the pitching staff has given you any sort of reason to have hope for the future.
Other than Montgomery. That's the one guy, like, I'll go B+ for Montgomery. You almost would say A, but he's had some down moments as well. He's had some
ups and downs, yeah.
But his numbers are good, so I got to give him credit. But everybody else, like Michaelis, man, C to C- range. I don't know. Is there anybody other than Montgomery on the pitching staff that you give a better than C grade to? I don't know if there is.
No.
Not even Hicks.
Not even Jordan Hicks.
Brutal in the beginning of the season.
He found a good role as a back end of the bullpen kind of guy, and maybe it can work for him, and maybe the Cardinals can turn that into a prospect or two at the trade deadline. But I don't see anybody that has wowed me to give a B or an A. The same way that guys like Goldschmidt and Arnold, like, their numbers are comparative to some of the better hitters in Major League Baseball right now. You cannot stack up anybody on this team, on this pitching staff particularly, and say, oh, yeah, they're a top 100 pitcher right now in the major leagues. Like, no.
Well, 100, I get what you're saying, but there's only 5 guys per team, like 150 starters. So some of them are going to be top 100.
No, okay, fine.
Top 100 players,
but top
probably
50,
not.
Right. Yeah, like top 50
like
around there.
Jordan Montgomery is going to be quality of like a high-end number 2 with what he's brought to the table with 3.23 ERA. Nobody else on the pitching staff can really claim that. The only other guy with an ERA below 4 that's been here other than a game or two is now Jordan Hicks, because he's been so good recently. But that took a long time to get him down to 3.93. Everybody else, man, it's just been very trying. And so you've got a lot of C's to C- to guys like Genesis Cabrera that should be taking steps forward, and he's taking steps back. Palante, same thing. They're getting like D+ for me, where it's just like collectively not a lot to be enthused about by the pitching staff. And it's the big reason the Cardinals are where they are. And a lot of Cardinals fans would say, yeah, we were telling Mo that back in November and December, and he was telling us, well, we think we've got enough, and we like the 6 or 7 starters that we have.
Well, and Mo definitely gets an F for this year.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
Marmol.
What would you give your Ollie Marmol grade before I give mine? Because
D.
Yeah, I would say it's a D at best. But I'm going to go right around D, just because, again, and John Mozeliak too. We talked about the interview with Fox 2 yesterday. John Mozeliak said, I don't put this on the coaching staff. Like, they were given the players, and this was kind of our boo-boo in the front office, which I appreciated him saying. But I do think there's a degree to which Marmol probably could have been a little more adaptable to certain things. Like, whether it was the front office telling him you got to play Tyler O'Neill in center field, I don't know. But he was kind of the mouthpiece of a lot of those early season weird things that went on. To me, the reason I would grade Ollie lower is not because he brought in the wrong reliever that blew the game. Like, I think Cardinals fans are barking up the wrong tree with that. Yeah. A lot of times he's just got the relievers that he's got, and it's been a bad situation because it's bad pitchers, bad pitching. But I would say of Ollie, some of the communication in the way that certain situations have been handled, it's like we're left scratching our heads too many times where I'm thinking, all right, he's got to at least wear that a little bit. They try to explain something and have confidence behind it, but we can all see it's not working. That's kind of where I would knock Ollie a little bit. So I would say D, but it's something that could easily be rising more than that for him if somehow they turn it around. But it kind of feels like they're in sell mode, and we're not really going to see that.